breathing is regulated or affected by sleep. Let's go on to our next slide. Breathing in sleep. As we fall asleep, the muscles in our body are going to relax. We're going to breathe more shallow, or our tidal volume is going to be smaller. We breathe slower, or we're going to have a slower respiratory rate. Our breathing continues to be rhythmic in most of our stages of sleep, and then our heart rate slows and our rhythm is very stable in most stages of sleep. And we call that non-REM. In our non-REM stages of sleep, our breathing is very rhythmic, our heart rate is very stable and slow, we breathe more shallow, our body's just nice and relaxed. Now when we go into REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep, our breathing and heart rate are going to change a little bit. Our breathing is less regulated, so occasionally we may take some deeper breaths. Breathing can be erratic at times, and it can increase in rate at times. Our heart rate is less regulated as well, and so our heart rhythm can be slightly erratic. Let's go on to our next slide. So we notice that in REM, our breathing and heart rate become a little erratic as compared to non-REM, where everything is very stable. If anything, it's a little shallow or slower than compared to when we're awake, but as compared to REM, our breathing and heart rate become a little erratic. So why does this happen? Why does it change with the different stages of sleep? Well, in REM sleep, our major muscle groups are inhibited. We like to say that they're paralyzed during sleep. So we lose our accessory muscle use, which helps with those breathing. Our breathing patterns and our heart rate coincide with rapid eye movements. So as we see the rapid eye movements occur, you'll also notice that that's when the heart rate and respiratory rate will change. They'll become erratic. You may see the respiratory rate increase or have to take a few deeper breaths, and the heart rate may become erratic as well. The diaphragm and heart are the only major muscles that are not paralyzed or inhibited during REM sleep. So they're the ones with the most control during this time. Nothing concrete explains the cause of rapid eye movements and why or how the heart rate and respiratory rate become so erratic during that stage of sleep, but it's known that respiratory rate and heart rate do change during REM sleep, that they do become less regular, so to speak. Let's go on to our next slide. Control of breathing and sleep. While we sleep, our breathing is regulated predominantly by changes in our CO2. When we're awake, the body responds to changes in CO2 the quickest and greatest. So if our CO2 goes up, we very quickly change our breathing and our cardiovascular system adjusts to that change. In non-REM sleep, the body responds the slowest to changes in CO2, and the least amount of this occurs in non-REM, or what we call quiet sleep. So what happens if we're not responding to these changes as quickly as when we're awake, what happens then is that our CO2 levels become slightly higher in non-REM sleep as compared to when we're awake. The slow response to CO2 changes and slightly higher CO2 levels in non-REM sleep may explain why we often stop breathing for about 10 seconds as we fall asleep, transitioning from wake to non-REM. We call this central apneas because we see that as we start to doze off and fall asleep, no airflow moves through the nose or mouth, and the respiratory muscles don't even attempt to take a breath. And that happens, it lasts for about 10 seconds as we doze off, and we call that a central apnea, and that is very common and considered normal to occur as we fall asleep. And again, they believe it's because we are less sensitive to the CO2 changes as we drift off to sleep. Now in REM sleep, our response to CO2 is somewhere in between that of being awake and our non-REM sleep. So our sensitivities to CO2 changes is least effective in non-REM sleep, slightly more effective in REM, and the most effective while we're awake. Let's go on to our next slide. Gas exchange in sleep. In normal sleep, our minute ventilation is reduced by about 1.5 liters. Our PaO2 decreases by about 10 torr, and our PaCO2 increases by about 8 torr. These are all due to the decrease in tidal volumes and decreased CO2 sensitivity and decreased respiratory rate, which occurs during non-REM sleep. We also see a decreased FRC, or functional residual capacity. We believe this is primarily due to laying down, the compression of the thorax by the body weight, and our loss of muscle tone once we fall asleep causes us to lose some of our functional residual capacity. If it's significant enough, it can cause atelectasis, leading to VQ mismatching. So